All right, we are now blessed to have a member of our congregation, Valerie Lynch, who has been a member here since last winter. She has been a volunteer with Youth for Understanding for 16 years, and she has had 14 different teenagers under her roof in this exchange student program. She's also the president-elect of our congregation, and we are very pleased to welcome her. She is going to be speaking under the title, You Have How Many Children?
Good morning. Good morning. I have a few stories to share this morning. Once upon a time, in a faraway place called Indianapolis, Nick and I were at a church service. The congregation was fairly similar to this one, except for the love of incense. Episcopalians are like that sometimes. Well, one of the members made an announcement, and she said, "As some of you may know," said Pat, "I am the field director for Youth for Understanding. It's an exchange student program, and there are about 350 kids coming to the United States this year, and about 75 don't have families yet. Can anyone help?" Nick and I had recently purchased a house after years of living in apartments, and we looked at each other and said, I've always thought about this. Should we? We later spoke to Pat and her husband, Rich, and said we'd like to discuss the possibilities. Rich came over to our home, and that week, Nick and I embarked on a great life adventure together. We would unwittingly learn and live much of what we would come to know as our Unitarian Universalist principles and traditions, long before we even got to a UU church. The next week we were shown some profiles, and we found Benjamin. We read his profile and the letter he had written to his yet unknown family, and we knew he was our son. Ben from Berlin, Germany, was 17 when he arrived that August, and together we had our first experience with IPS, the Inner City School District of Indianapolis. Busing was still going on at the time, sending black students to the white suburban schools so that those schools could prove that they were integrated. Being a white family, we could go to any school in the district, but if we had been a black family, even if we lived across the street from the high school, we wouldn't have been able to go there. This was startling to me and a puzzle to Ben. We ended up choosing the school closest to downtown where I worked. If these schools were going to be difficult to work with, I wanted to be close by. Ben would go on to see many things and experience many things that tourists never see. We learned that there were many caring people at the school too, many teachers trying to give their students a worthwhile learning experience. Ben made the most of his experience here, and he played on the soccer team, which was not the best team in the city, and he performed in school plays. From Ben, one of the things I learned is that you never know what kids hear when they come to church. I'll never forget one time he had done something wrong. I can't for the life of me remember what it is, but his response was, "I am truly sorry and I humbly repent." One of the prayer responses that he heard while attending church with us. He's an amazing young man and a wonderful son. Agnes came next. The rules about the schools had changed, and now we were assigned to a school in our neighborhood, which was about 6 miles north of us. Agnes was a great girl, but she came with a problem. She had an eating disorder. She came playing a role. And I thought about this at Michael Rellen's sermon last week. She was playing something she wasn't. On her profile, she was someone that didn't like to smoke and enjoyed going to church. when it was just the opposite. So I tried to tell her to be who she was, that she was a wonderful girl, but she ended up just staying for the semester. But we had a wonderful time with her. Oleg arrived in 1998, August. He was another German, but his mother was Ukrainian, so he was bilingual, Russian and German. He was a bit mischievous. He sent his mother a photo of the Indianapolis women's prison and told her that it was his high school and how safe he felt behind these barbed wires. His mother ended up sending that to family members around Germany and Ukraine, saying, "Oh my God, what's with the schools of Indiana?" It was several weeks, maybe even a couple of months, before he fessed up to his mom. One of the things I loved about Oleg was his giving nature. He would come to volunteer with me at a local nursing home, and he would come to talk about current events. But afterwards, he would always go and visit people that would never leave their room. It was the most amazing thing that he would be able to develop these relationships. I remember he had this way of reaching out. I remember speaking to one of the women there many months after Oleg had left. And I knew her pretty well, but she always forgot my name. She'd say, "I forget your name, what is it?" "Valerie." She said, "Valerie, where is Oleg? I miss him." She remembered him. I went to a local CVS to get some photographs printed. And, you write down your address and phone number. And the lady looks at the form and she says, "Wait a minute, this is Oleg's address. Do you know him?" I must add a disclaimer. Oleg did use 3 or 4 rolls of film a week. That was before digital. Oleg is another remarkable man that you would never forget meeting. Tomohiko from Japan and Lena, our Russian daughter from Ukraine, came to us in August of '99. Tomohiko was only with us for a short time as he was moving on to another host family. But one of the things he wanted to do before he left was make a dinner for us. So we went to the Asian grocery store, got all the ingredients, and then he got on the phone to talk to his mother, trying to follow her instructions over the phone. It was so sweet. But years later, he returned to visit, and he said, "I would like to make a Japanese dinner for you again." And then with a smile, he says, "And I don't have to call my mother this time." Lena from Ukraine was our first child to arrive from very difficult circumstances. Her father had been in the Soviet army, and he was working at Chernobyl after it blew up. The Soviet Union collapsed, and Russians living in other countries were not repatriated. They were told to just stay wherever they were, and that's where they were going to be. Lena lost no love for her new home nation of Ukraine. Her father turned to alcohol. Her mother, though a physician, the family was still in destitute straits. Lena won a scholarship to come to the United States. We wish she could have stayed longer, but it wasn't meant to be. Her scholarship required that she had to go back, at least for several years. Johannes and Oraz were next. 2 boys who would learn many more than just American culture. Johannes was from Germany, and Oraz was from Turkmenistan. I don't know if you know where Turkmenistan is. It's right next door to Afghanistan, and no one is allowed in or out, with few exceptions. Oraz was the only son of a very wealthy family at that time, in a culture where the boys rule. Not so in our house. He was the younger one with the smaller room. He was supposed to have gone on to a permanent family. He was only with us temporarily, supposedly. But he was supposed to move on. But he decided that, like Johannes, he belonged with us. And we agreed. So he ended up staying with us for the year. He relished being the younger one and appreciated the wisdom of his older German brother, Johannes. We called them the twins. Tall, blonde Johannes and shorter, dark-featured Oraz got a kick of telling people, yes, we are brothers, and no, we're not adopted. They were the last of our children to go to the World Trade Center with us on our annual trips to New York to visit my family. Oraz was our first Muslim child, and we took him to a masjid nearby, and his response was, you know, Mom, do you remember when they did this? They held their hands like this? They're supposed to be like this. They're not real Muslims. I would like to think he became a little more tolerant over his year with us. Have you ever been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C.? The most amazing experience we had, seeing Johannes from Germany take his brother, Oraz from Turkmenistan, through that museum together. Oraz had never learned about the Holocaust. Pablo from Antofagasta in northern Chile came to us in August of 2001. On our first evening, after Pablo had arrived in Indianapolis, we decided to go for dinner at the Texas Roadhouse. And as we parked our car in the parking lot, it began to rain, and then thunderstorm. I knew that Pablo had not experienced snow, but what I was shocked to learn, he never saw rain either. He comes from the area by the Atacama, which is one of the driest places on earth. They get 0.2 of an inch of rain per decade. So that was amazing. Pablo was with us on the day of 9/11, and he and his family knew that we had family in New York City. Pablo's mother had been hearing that we had food shortages, so she called and was concerned and wanted to know if she could help. They were so concerned for us. I remember reflecting later, here we are in America, no food. That would never happen here. But people from other parts of the world know that no country is immune to everything. That October, Eugene from Korea joined us and became Pablo's sister. She was with us for about 6 months as her family was dealing with some employment and transportation issues. She introduced me and reintroduced Nick to Asian culture. We had a very long local relationship with Eugene, as she was able to go to Indiana University in Indiana for 4 years after her time with us. And she recently married last year in Korea and now just had a beautiful baby girl. So we have a Korean granddaughter. So it's been an honor to be her mom. Stefan, another German, came to us in 2002, another young person with a great appreciation for life. During that summer, I had discovered the book If Grace is True by 2 Quaker ministers, Jim Mulholland and Phil Gully. It was their contribution to the ideas of universalism, and I was hooked. I met them at a book signing and learned that Jim was a pastor of a friends meeting right near our home, so Nick and I started attending. Stefan, though atheist, attended with us a couple of times. And one evening we went to hear Phil and Jim give a talk at a very large church at an annual multi-faith festival that took place in Indianapolis every year. Stefan had just met Jim, but Jim spotted him across a very crowded hall and shouted out a greeting to him. And I remember Stefan said to me later, he remembered my name. What a way to remember the dignity of every person. Stefan had a horrible accident when he was with us. He was run over by a car while skating home one night just before Thanksgiving. He was dragged under the car and very badly burned under his arm. I learned a lot about faith carrying one through tough times. Stefan is an atheist, but he believes in life, and that life happens sometimes, and you just carry on. He had such an acceptance and grace throughout his healing process, and he touched many people. After one of his outpatient surgeries, the surgeon came out to me and said, "Did you see all those physical therapy people that have been working with Stefan going in and out of the surgical area?" And I said, "Yes, that was very nice of them." He says, "They were all on their own time coming in to see if they could help. And let me tell you, they don't do that for anybody." He says, "Stefan is amazing and we all love him." Prong, a very petite girl from Thailand, is one of the strongest people I know. She came to us the following year. After having two previous families, the first one being very neglectful, and the second one being extraordinarily fundamentalist Baptists, who upon finding out she had gay friends decided she must be gay too. They demanded that she be moved. Prong came to us very late in that school year, early April. This tiny girl was strong in so many ways. She was able to move heavy, large furniture like no one I knew when she was setting up her room. She succeeded, but more important, she had spiritual and emotional strength. She made the most of her remaining time. She made such an impression at the school that they counted her grades as though she had been there the whole quarter. She was doing so well in school. As an artist, they invited her to paint a mural on one of the school walls so they'd be able to remember her. In her Buddhist way, she had to leave so much, behind because of the luggage restrictions, the weight, you can bring hardly anything back. She took pictures of the things she wanted to remember. And this is one of the things she made in school. And so we have a part of Prong with us everywhere we go. So this has been to Indianapolis, New York, and now here in Arizona. So I learned much about Thai culture and religion that year. Anna, a lovely girl from Japan, came to us in January 2005. From Anna, I saw the strength again, in beginning again. Anna was struggling in the inner city school system, and she had come from a very quiet, reserved community in Japan. And her host family was with several young children and another student, and there was chaos 24/7 for her. So she came to us in what I now call a rescue situation, a time to take a break and get ready to begin again with a new family. We told her to take a deep breath and everything will be okay. Within a few days, we knew that we would be the family she stayed with. She was wonderful. She switched to another inner city school, the one that Ben and Pablo had gone to, and she began to really get it. She started making friends. She would stand up to these giant football player-sized guys and tell them, "You get out of my face. I'm not interested, you know?" All with good humor, of course. That she started to make many friends. She also helped the teacher of a new Japanese language class that was starting at the school. Just before leaving us, she wrote to the school district director, thanking him for allowing exchange students to come to the school district. She called her experience one of the joys of my eternity. I love that expression. Anna came back to the States again for a college exchange year to study racism. It's a problem worldwide, and she saw it firsthand. She learned a lot on her year. The following year, we had another rescue situation, AQ from Finland. She had been in northern Indiana, but it wasn't the best match. As she related to me, they said she was lazy, that she might be a bad influence on the others. Well, in our experience, that was so not the case. She wasn't lazy, and she was one of the friendliest people I knew. She was eager to help, she just didn't know how. She either had a quirk in her learning experience or maybe what we would call a learning disability. For example, when she was raking leaves, she told me, "Can you please tell me when I'm done, because I won't know when I'm done." In cleaning the bathroom, she would scrub, but then she didn't know what to do next. So we learned together that she needed to create a how-to chart for every chore that she would have, and she could follow that step by step. That's not a bad idea for a lot of us. But she told me she had always been considered the young one of the family, kind of the youngest child, and she was supposed to play that role. Now, that's my words, not hers. I told her that she had come all this way on her own on this experience, and she could change that role. Years later, when AQ learned that we had moved to the New York City area, she contacted me and let me know she wanted to get together on an upcoming trip, and she had a stopover in New York. It was so wonderful to see her, but what she had to tell me was incredible. She related to me that she had just returned from a trip to the Far East. She had gone by herself, and on one occasion she had gotten on a bus, the wrong bus, and she was getting all this conflicting information on how to get to her destination, plus the language difference. But she said to herself, "I can do this. I'll manage." She learned that on her exchange year. She also related to me that her friends now come to her for cleaning advice. She said she was so glad to be able to tell me this story, and I was so proud of her I could have cried. Omar, our last student, came to us in 2007. He was part of the YES program. The YES program is Youth Exchange and Study. And it was an exchange program established by Senator Richard Lugar of Indiana, a Republican, and the late Senator Ed Kennedy from Massachusetts in response to 9/11. What better way to promote peace than to invite people from predominantly Muslim countries to America to live with us and learn from us, and for us to send our students over to their countries. So teens, Omar's profile was given to the Indianapolis volunteers that July. Nick and I had been deciding to take a break from hosting that year, but when we saw that Omar was coming to Indianapolis, we were like, our break can wait, we're taking him. He's our son. So this was another amazing experience. Omar is a very devout Muslim, and I think he felt at ease when Nick was able to point out the direction to Mecca. And when Omar took out his travel prayer rug, which has a compass in it, he discovered Nick was right on target. We had learned his dietary needs, and we knew that we would not be having pork in our home that year. We invited him to shop with us to prepare for Ramadan. And Ramadan was going to be very difficult this year because it was happening in the summer, and Indiana had just started having daylight savings time, so the days were very long. He didn't eat or drink during daylight hours in Ramadan. So he would go without eating, he'd play a soccer game after school, and couldn't eat dinner until about 9:30 at night. It was remarkable to witness his devotion to his faith, and we gladly waited so that we could eat dinner together and share in his stories of his day. and it was a pretty difficult high school he was attending. Some of the staff, and this was the very school that Prong went to, some of the staff became very hostile to Omar. But I didn't really learn this until later in the year. I think they were very frightened to have a Muslim at their school. When the State Department contacted the school, and they often do this, they wanted to give a special honor to the high school and to thank them for hosting a yes student. I was horrified to learn that the school refused their visit. Well, we learn too late sometimes. I wish I'd known earlier. Fortunately, other staff and students were much more welcoming. Many of his classmates had never heard of Yemen and had no idea about the differences between our nations. But Omar carried on, maintaining a very high grade average and displaying a talent in art. And art is not at all a respected talent in his country, but he is wonderful. And I have an exhibit if you want to see it later. I have one of his works. Omar also took up speed ice skating. And I would love to see him represent Yemen in this Winter Olympics sometime. I don't think he could beat Apollo Ono yet, but he could certainly qualify in a Yemeni competition. Omar also attended the Quaker meeting with us and befriended the adults and the teens that went there, and also the youth minister and the minister, Jim Mulholland. They had a wonderful impact on one another. Omar learned many different views of Christianity, and the meeting learned a lot about Islam. Omar had the opportunity to do a show and tell of items from Yemen while wearing his Arab attire, complete with a dagger, which I brought to. And he also gave a sermon on Islam while at the meeting one Sunday. These relationships continue. Omar is now attending Earlham College, which is a Quaker university in Indiana, on a scholarship studying international studies and peace studies. He's also serving as the project assistant for the Richmond, Indiana Human Rights Commission. He learned a lot about what I learn now to be UU principles. We couldn't be more proud of him. We are so blessed that we can continue to keep in touch with our children from throughout the world, especially through email and Facebook. We've been to Germany twice to visit our extended family, most recently to attend Ben's wedding to beautiful Marie Magda, and they are now expecting in October. We had a little family reunion when Ben, Oleg, Johannes, and Stefan all met, and then we had a wonderful dinner together in Berlin. We also got to meet Oleg's wife, Isabel, and his two beautiful little daughters, Felina and Selma. We were also able to meet Pablo's family in Chile several years ago, too. You've never met more generous, gracious people than the families of our children. Our exchange children have become doctors, teachers, journalists, banking and business professionals, and artists. And some are still in university and taking part in new adventures. Nick and I don't host now that we're living in a senior community, but I remain a volunteer for the Youth for Understanding, having relationships with students all over the world and their host families. I'll be connected with the YES program again this year, working with students from Lebanon and Suriname. What better way to continue practicing what I learned from the UU principles and traditions? How do I best affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person? The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the interdependent web along with the others. For me, it has been in relationship with those who are different, loving and learning and growing together. Thank you.
Please stand as you're willing and able, and we will sing number 159, This Is My Song. Please join me in the reading of our West Valley UU Church's mission statement. It is up here behind me if you do not have it in your order of service. This church provides a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for our lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual search.